Thank you so much. Do take one of the chairs. Yes, you have rightly done so, and we will invite more people. As you said, very inspiring and excellent speakers. Director of EIT Food, CLC Northeast, Maria Elisa Maurice, who you've already seen, but let's welcome her again. Yes, let's give everybody a hand. That way everybody feels more welcome. Deputy Director for International Affairs at Bioeconomy Research Institute, Virginia Kargite. If you don't mind, I will take this one. I'm sorry, I had to be rude. Laura Liepina of the European Commission, she is joining us online. I think I can see her, but she's not on the screen yet, but you're with us. Bioeconomy and Food Systems Director General for Research and Innovation, Laura Liepina. Yes, you're here. Hi. Thank you for joining. Innovation Agency Head of Biotech Lab, Yekaterina Kaliniene, is also with us. And also, I've seen him somewhere, member of the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania, Giedrius Surplys. He's at the back as well. Give him a hand too. And this way, everybody's on stage now. Grigoris Hatsikostas is with us as well. First of all, Grigoris, I will just ask you to explain the zebra and what was the other animal? Camel. Yeah, camel analogies. Are these actually financial terms and analogies that actually exist? And would you then explain what?
I wish I had made them my own, but in fact there are books about them, so I cannot claim of those. Yes, in fact this is kind of a response to in the beginning of 2010 decade, there was a very big discussion about the unicorns. Unicorns are the companies that are exceeding the 1 billion valuation.
We've got, I think, 2 in Lithuania, three.
Yes. So in that sense, the whole thing changed quickly, exactly because we found out that this motto of Silicon Valley, move fast, break things, doesn't always work for society, and certainly doesn't work for our sector, for agri-food. Because it's a sector that we have marginalized communities, vulnerable people, we have to take care of the environment, etc. That's why we have to think of more, let's say, symbiotic creatures, and also more real and not mythical creatures. That's why they use the analogy of camel. It's the company that can survive in times of capital drought, in times that money is not running in the streets. And also the zebra, which has black and white stripes, and the white stripes may be symbolizing the contribution to society and the contribution to environment, while at the same time, performance, financial performance and profitability have to remain alive.
Okay, thanks for explaining that again. And also on venture capital, you have basically said that it's not just the venture capital that startups should look into, as opposed to some, opinions, right? Because there were claims that it's venture capital, startups, venture capital. It's not just that. So what is it then? What are the extra funding opportunities? What are the most effective ones? This will be, I think, an opening question to everybody. What are some maybe unique or non-unique, but financial mechanisms that have been particularly effective, you would say, in the agri-food sector? Let's start with you, Maria.
Well, I have to say, if I work for EIT Food, well, definitely that is one of those mechanisms that is particularly focusing on food, an agri-food area. I also would argue indeed that it is rather efficient. It is rather fast turning. It doesn't, obviously, it's not a, let's say, solution for everything. So indeed, we, for example, don't fund research, basic research, but rather innovation. So it is in that very specific spot where we fund. But indeed, the knowledge, the sectoral knowledge is there. And understanding of the future of a food is definitely there. I think that's really important because often funding, it depends on whether it is. I mean, you can go to the bank and you can convince your banker, or you can go to investor and basically convince the investor, and hopefully someone who's in a food area. But indeed, EIT Food is definitely one of those. Of course, Horizon Europe is also offering areas where the focus is on food and agri-food area. So there are really, in European-wide, there's pretty well-established and permanent funding opportunities. And I really want to insist there that the permanence is there. So, you don't have to every time start looking from the scratch, but you can really look for these opportunities that are there. You know how they function, and therefore you can also play it into your plans.
Anyone else would want to share their experiences in terms of unique financial mechanisms?
So Innovation Agency also, we provide public funding actually because agri-food sector joined Smart Specialization Strategy just last year. So maybe it's not well communicated enough, but everything what comes on the biotech roof and agri-food is also. So we can provide some funding also for everything before TRL 8.
What would you say are the most prominent or the most promising areas in agri-food innovation that warrant increasing or increased investment?
Well, I'm not going to be very, maybe you're not going to like my answer much because
we will.
I am
Whatever
supposed,
you say,
to advocate for innovation and small enterprises and startups, scale-ups, and so on and so on. But I think for Lithuania, we have great potential in our big companies because, as Georgi mentioned, economic units is very important part of scaling up. And you can only, be profitable and be camel and be zebra and go unicorn if you can provide this scale. So our big companies, we just need to find tools to help them innovate and to motivate them to innovate.
But what kind of tools are we missing?
Well, when our big companies like dairy ones, grain ones, start to innovate, and companies innovate only if they cannot sell as they sell now.
So are you saying innovation departments, more innovation people within the company?
Lithuania would start tomorrow, make new yogurt, made of air or whatever, I would be the biggest fan of it.
Okay. Ms. Kargite, how would you say the Bioeconomy Research Institute, how does it contribute to identifying and supporting high potential agri-food innovations on probably first the national scale and then on international scale as well?
Yeah, so first of all, I would like to introduce, because we are quite recently established institute in Vytautas Magnus University, and we are trying to work on the challenges by combining various areas of research. For instance, to preserve biodiversity loss, we combine forest genetics with remote sensing, or to go beyond, for instance, soil health improvement solutions, also to suggest raw materials which has human health benefits as anti-cancer or antioxidant features. So you need collaboration between agronomy and food health sciences. So that's what we are doing. But like in terms of attracting funds and in general research funding, because Grigoris more talked about startup funding, so I will here take position to talk about research funding. And actually that on European level, and I would back to the previous discussion, because we do have, we fund basic research, fundamental research, which is, ground for these breakthrough technologies, as artificial intelligence, genetics, and so on. And then what it comes, that we don't use full potential of that, because when it comes to application in the market, then it migrates to places where regulatory framework is more favorable. So that's, I think, that's the issue. And even in such systems as United States, there is calculations, for instance, that Mississippi's R&D investments are more beneficial for California than Mississippi itself, because they prepare PhD students and they move to Silicon Valley. So we have to be careful of that. And second, more issue and to say, a challenge, European, Central and Eastern Europe challenge, I think that needs to be addressed, that and where we find commonalities between scientists in Central and Eastern Europe and the farmer in Central and Eastern Europe, that both do work for half price. And,
what do you mean?
This is it, that we look at the projects, at Horizon projects, and you see that it's the same project, the same complexity of the work, but our researchers are paid less, and it's not failure of the European Commission, what we say. It's a fail of our national funding, public research funding, that catch up to the economy, and then how to say that it would be more balanced. And this is also very challenging for us to catch up with developed, advanced countries, because we are in a common research area, and those institutions in Western or Nordic, like Europe, they have better proposition for our young researchers, which are quite mobile than instead like older ones. So I think that these are like risks, and that needs to be considered, because then we will live with poor quality public research, and we will not be able to deliver these high expectations for this transformation to lead with the business.
Okay, since you said this is not the failure of the European Commission, but the failure of our national funding, I would have to address this question to Mr. Surplice and say, scientists and farmers work for half price. There's a challenge to catch up with the Western countries. Why have we failed?
Good question. You know, we were speaking of unicorns and camels and zebras, but I think, you know, still the mammoth in the room is the EU funding, which is roughly 50 billion euros a year. And just by following what's going on with this common agricultural policy in the European Union since basically the founding of the EU, we could say that some shortcomings are there, and we still haven't solved them. So first of all, this paradox that I, consumer with 3 children, still feel that I'm paying too much for the food. The agricultural producer, the farmer, is still not happy with the price he gets. So there is some mismatch in supply and demand, and we still couldn't solve it. The second thing, each euro that we invest in the common agricultural policy in the EU results in the end of the day in 1 euro that we return. So I mean, there's just no scale at all. And the third thing is this disparity, the inequality or the lack of solidarity that is visible. And I fully agree here with you, although with Augustas we were nodding and turning the heads, not agreeing. So yes, it still looks like with this huge amount of funding, we are not capable of solving all the issues of food security, of sustainability, of environment protection, of equal income of farmers and sustaining the living in the rural areas. And I think this is a good provocative exercise here today, thinking that this mammoth is actually dying. I mean, you know, if we will have Ukraine in the EU, and we will, and I do hope for that as soon as possible, the average size of a farm in Ukraine is 480 hectares, average. I mean, there are many that are above 480. Whilst in France, for example, we have 30 hectares. In Poland, we have 8 hectares on average. So if we think that we can live with the same amount of 1/3 of EU's budget assigned for the common agricultural policy, that's just not going to work. And you know, I like the saying of Umberto Eco, the famous Italian writer. He was once asked, you know, can you imagine that the books will no longer be there by a journalist? And he said, can you imagine that internet will no longer be there? And it's true now, we have mobile internet. I mean, nobody uses this wired internet. So just the same question we have to ask about the EU funding. And if we are talking about in the next 10 years, we should forget about it. And thank you for your specter of potential investments that we have to already start considering about. And I think, just to end this short introduction, we have to think of agriculture more and more as of interdisciplinary, linked with trade, linked with ecology, linked with the food industry, linked with energy, linked with even communication, etc., if we want it to be viable. And the last dilemma, which I still cannot imagine how we are going to solve, is in Lithuania, we have 100,000 farmers on paper, out of which productive, profitable, we probably have 20%. So what are we going to do with the 80% of small farms, of not digitalized farms, etc.? This is the question that still is to be answered.
We have a Commission representative with us, and I mean, the only thing I can do is to address all of the issues that you've now outlined to you. We should start forgetting about the EU funding. Agriculture should be looked at as interdisciplinary, and also, specific countries. Lithuania, 20% of the farmers are productive, and the remaining 80 are not. Would you want to comment on any of these statements that we have now underlined?
Yes, thank you for, first of all, inviting me to take part in this discussion. I unfortunately cannot speak on behalf of the whole European Commission, as I represent the Research and Innovation Directorate General, and more specifically the Bioeconomy Unit. But as part of the bioeconomy team, which is a very overarching concept trying to bring together all different sectoral policies, one of them being also agriculture and also food systems, so the food production. We face these issues, and we try to, within the bioeconomy framework, to look for possible win-win solutions and address the trade-offs. And I heard that some of the panelists also mentioned the Central and Eastern European aspect, and how the countries that more recently joined the EU can actually be more effective in deploying the funds that the European Commission is providing. I would like to mention that is also an area that we very closely work on, and one of the widening actions within our priority list is the BioEast initiative, where also Lithuania is part of. And I'm not sure if how well familiar you are with this initiative that brings together 11 Central and Eastern European countries to deploy more sustainable bioeconomies. But we see there is currently a rather low interest of the policymakers to have and develop more holistic and more sustainably based bioeconomy concepts. At the same time, there is huge untapped potential for the biomass, and especially in the agri-food, as it comprises more than half of the whole biomass that there is. And also we see that there is a lack of skills and training in the food and the bio-based sector. And therefore, the Commission has come up with several initiatives to address this innovation divide. And I would like to speak about one of the initiatives, which is under the new European Innovation Agenda. If I can continue now, or if we have time for that.
The one specific initiative that you want to speak about, but is it to do with, as you have now mentioned, skills and training, skills or training, the lack of it? Or would you also single out the framework so that we understand what the European Commission is doing in terms of policy to support funding and development of agri-food innovation? Could we get a broader picture of funding specifically?
Yes, of course. Well, as it was already mentioned before, of course, we can mention the Common Agricultural Policy that historically has supported innovation for agriculture and agri-food, for example, through the European Innovation Partnership for Agriculture. Maria Lisa already mentioned the Horizon, so the previous program, Horizon 2020, and the current program, Horizon Europe, which is the world's biggest public research innovation program. The total budget is 95 billion euros, and one of the clusters, namely the cluster 6 on food bioeconomy, is directly relevant to sustainable food systems. We have this research innovation policy called Food 2030 to support funding for systemic food systems transformation, and we have these 11 pathways for action, and they are being implemented through the cluster 6, and so far it has led to more than 100 projects in Europe and also in Africa, and to provide new knowledge and solutions. As upcoming initiatives, I can mention the Horizon Europe Partnership for Sustainable Food Systems that will be launched very soon, and it will further support the deployment of agri-food sector. It will engage member states and should provide benefits for the nutrition, for the climate, for the circularity and the communities. And that is more specifically for agri-food, but now also if I can mention the new European Innovation Agenda. So that was launched last year by our commissioner. One of the actions to boost innovation and the competitiveness is the regional innovation valleys. And we have launched 2 instruments with a total budget of 170 million euros. So the European Innovation Ecosystem Work Program, and the other under the Interregional Innovation Investments Instrument. So the results of the first calls will be announced in next spring, and our ambition is to identify 100 regions that could be called regional innovation valleys, and I hope that also some in Lithuania and in the nearby countries could be one of the regional innovation valleys.
Okay, so the list of instruments by the European Commission, it's not just venture capital, you say, Grigoris. Have we learned now about more of them, or are there many still missing that we have to at least first of all name and then discuss?
I think that since we're talking about food today, we all know that the magic in cooking is the balance, no? So what we need to do is, when we're approaching the issue, how do we go from basic research to innovation? How do we go from innovation to market? The mix changes, but the mix remains the same. There has not been a single innovation in the world that did not rely in the beginning on state funding. We can go, I can go even to ancient Greece and give you examples about that. How the naval technology of ancient Greeks was funded by the state. So we certainly need the state funding. But then we have to find the right mix between state funding, risk capital, private capital that is traditional, like banks or bonds or anything, and at the end, the most important thing that I tried during the initiation to raise, from the market, from customers. We forget that when we're talking about the economy, the most important aspect in the economy is the customer. So I think that we need to try to link all those together with the aspect of how the market will respond, and to try to do a little bit of foresight when we are financing innovation, where we are financing basic science today, to try to imagine how the world would look like after 10 or 20 years, that this will go in the market. We discussed before that about lab-grown meat. Obviously, today we cannot go to the butcher and buy 1 kilo of lab-grown meat, but we need to imagine our society in 10 years that lab-grown meat will be a necessity. And based on that, to finance the steps that are coming.
But what do we have to do to fulfill this? Is that what you mentioned in your presentation, in the future, having the investors sit at the table together with the startup throughout the process? Is that what is, one of the ways to fill in the mix? Because you say that the balance is key, and why are we not doing that already?
There are many reasons. First of all, unfortunately, the private investors currently, particularly in Europe, they suffer from short-termism. They look at the next marketplace, they look at the next opportunity to make quick cash and turn their money quickly, rather than strategic investments. That's why, for example, EIC Accelerator program of the Commission exists, to fill in this gap of the innovations that want to go there. Another problem is that the inventors, the people who are inventing the new technologies and everything, they lack for market awareness. They don't know their customers. That's why we have invented in Europe the concept of living labs, where customers, consumers sit down together with the technology developers from the very beginning to design the solutions together. I think that these are ways. Generally, if I could use one word about how we can speed up this process, I would say collaboration. Collaboration among the different dots, to connect the dots faster.
But it seems like collaboration has been the word that has been mentioned in these forums all the time. We need more collaboration, especially with academia, with politicians, businesses, and it's always like that. I mean, if we know the solution, why aren't we collaborating already? Also, the problem of mismatch, essentially, this is the same that you're saying, between the product and the market need. It always arises on all of the clustered conversations. Everybody says that whenever startup is mentioned, there is always someone who says, there are these people who create a product and then look around and say, I have a great product, why is nobody interested? Why aren't we solving this problem? Why haven't we solved this already? Market awareness.
Maybe not market awareness, but on collaboration. Why? Because it requires effort. And we know that exercise is good, but we sometimes skip the gym. Yes. So also, like in terms of science and business collaboration, I think that we made progress in Lithuania, and we have examples with AgriFood ecosystem projects on carbon farming, on smart forestry enabled by artificial intelligence and Internet of Things. So yes, but it requires systemic work, and business is busy with producing food. We are busy with producing publications, and you need to invest time into meeting actually, and you have to do it systemically, not ad hoc, like, oh, now it's the call, let's submit application. You need to know what are the needs, what are capabilities of different actors to really, and you have to have options. Okay, we submit here, it's a plan A, then it's a plan B, and then plan C. So it requires effort, I think, but I think that we're making progress there.
Do we have any platforms in which that has already been successful, or the platforms that we would know of that are still needed? Is that what you wanted to comment on?
We own B2B making platform, and I really encourage all the companies to really get in there also. But I just want really to also comment about this. I think it's also in our mindset. I think we are not taught enough to actually involve the end user, the consumer, at the very early stage of our research. We never ask people, are you going to eat that? Are you going to buy that from us? We need to talk to, Tesco's, Whole Foods, Lidl, and so on, and ask for their pain points, and then come back to academia, to our labs, and invent. And it's usually a different way. First, we do our research, when we produce MVP, and when we ask if you're going to buy it. I think it's very, it's in our mindsets. We need to change that. We need to start teaching it very early.
Mr. Surplis, how would you define this? Do you have any good examples? Do we, as Lithuania, have any good examples? How does the Lithuanian government, if I can just put it very broadly, support agri-food innovations through funding mechanisms and through policy? Do we have anything to boast of?
Well, I would say that any of the success stories in agriculture and innovation, they were funded by the EU money, by the Ministry of Agriculture mostly, and that was a good start for them. The seed money out of which some success stories like AgriFood, like Auga, our organic farming industry, like other companies that are now building the biogas power plants, etc., have stemmed. But again, I'm coming back to the same. We are, as the EU, as the governments, as the taxpayers, advocates, we are putting pressure on startups, on businesses, on agriculture, well, legal and physical persons. Where should they go? Which direction? Now they must be green. Then, you know, it changes because the war in Ukraine started by Russia. It proves to us that food security is also important. So now we go a little less green. Then, you know, maybe we'll start going digital. And as you rightly mentioned, you know, the business, they follow where the money goes. So this must be also tuned with the needs of the businesses. And I would say, again, this cooperation that we speak of today is a very good word, but we have to listen to the community, and we have to listen to the eaters, to the consumers of agricultural production, to know where the money should go. And you know, I just come from a conference in Brussels. We were discussing the same issues, and there was this idea that EU shouldn't prioritize like 11 priorities or 10 priorities for the startups. It should say, look, guys, now we have the main issues: going green, food security, and I don't know, energy independence. So all the money, all the avalanche of funding goes only to these three sectors. You want to be a startup, okay, you have three topics. Otherwise, you go and, you know, look for business angels or for some venture capital, etc. So we have to limit the scope where the EU is investing with, the, you know, not seeding money everywhere. But on the other hand, we have to leave free space for the businesses, for the potential startups to look for real business cases and not invest or create, innovate where the money is. I mean, it's not an innovation, it's just a grant sucking, as it's said sometimes.
Okay, but do we really have, can we afford, for example, going less green, as you have said? We just go greener, we go less green according to the geopolitical situation and so on and so forth. I don't think that at this point we can go less green in any way. That's, I mean, a very, very important remark to be made. But in terms of limiting the scope, should we really be doing that? Should we be putting less pressure on startups, for example, and limiting the scope in terms of areas that they should be working on? Maria, would you agree with that statement?
I wouldn't.
That's good for any discussion.
Well, I think
not agreeing.
Definitely, I wouldn't. I'm a little bit like staggered by your question or statement there. I kind of, you see, I see it like this: is that first of all, today there's a lot of money out there. I mean, whether it is public or private money, and then once again, then there are also situations where somebody cannot find funding. So, you know, don't get me wrong, but basically there's a lot of money out there. We are not overall in lack of money. Then the question is really like how that money can be then, you know, really distributed in a where it is actually really needed and how it is needed. Now, there's a risk aversion as well that is obviously has to deal with that one in terms of where, for example, when it comes to companies or countries, they have a completely different view. Is that in the countries or regions, obviously you know, normally the public funding should also support the infrastructure building. I'm not talking about roads. Okay, fine, if they're in bad shape, and you need good ones as well. But what I mean is that, you know, if we imagine the future like this, how are we supporting it from our policy decisions and funding related to that one? And I kind of would bring here another word, is that we kind of still work in silos, you know, in many ways. And this is maybe one of those things as well where it doesn't really help. But I don't, you know, really, I don't think it is a lack of money. There's a lot of money out there. It's rather about dynamics, about less working in silos, and then also indeed breaking those ways and rules that don't work anymore. I mean, it's tough. It's tough to say that, for example, that if we, for example, I give you another example. When in, for example, AgriFood a couple of years ago, we were receiving a lot of proposals on proteins, but they were very much on like chocolate protein thing or insects. And well, we did invest money, you know, in there, and because we wanted these startups to, obviously, to at least have a go, but it is rather short-termism. It is like indeed like helping them to maybe make the first jump, and then well, there was no second jump maybe, and then in the insects. For example, well, Europe, we don't eat insects. We try them, but we don't eat them. It's not part of our heritage. Food is culture. So then we decided that we will stop, through the strategy that we were building, we will stop funding insect for food. So it was a tough decision, because then there were still like those wonderful startups who came and said, oh, I have this wonderful thing, and look, I have this technology that I'm doing better than the ones previously. But no, you need to. This is just a one, maybe a little bit different example, but we need to make those decisions. And the countries also need to make, and regions, the decisions where they say, look, if we are starting now funding this one, we go completely in a different direction where actually we want to go. And so the focus is still really important, and the kind of a dare to say, no, this is stop. Now we stop funding these things, we will go that direction. I'm not sure if I answered completely your question, but that triggered these kind of thoughts in my mind. And I see that in the same way as if you take the whole European funding area, is that, well, of course, it's not necessarily as agile as private funding, but we also try in European scale to actually meet those future needs. I mean, whether it hits exactly the target at the right time, that's maybe another question. But and this everybody needs to keep in mind, because otherwise, what is going to happen is that, you know, yeah, well, the whole system is going around and around and around, and you know, there's lack of focus as well in terms of, I think, funding. And a little bit like you said in the beginning, that there are some myths, and these myths also has to be broken down and said that, look, but well, then the question is the timing, is that, are we ready to make those decisions when, you know, it's happening? Because it's easy to analyze backwards and say, you know, these were the problems, but when you are actually really in that action, how do you do? Where do you direct the finances that are there? How do you convince the policymakers that, you know, this is now where the investment has to happen, when at the same time, maybe 2 years ago, they were making another type of a decision. But, you know, this is what is triggering me.
Grigoris, do you want to comment? You look very concerned.
First of all, I would like to say that I also don't believe that we should stop financing and investing in green technologies. There is no other way.
Yeah.
I think whoever didn't know by now, the previous couple of years, that was clear. We need to decarbonize the economy, we need to get rid of the fossil fuel and everything. We see the political implications of our wrong choices in the past. Certainly, we cannot connect the dots forward that easily as we can do backwards. But one thing we need to take into account in this case is that when we are designing and implementing policies about financing, we have to think at the end of the day that this euro could have been a hospital, could have been a nursing house for our children, could have been, and we have to take real responsibility about those finances. Sometimes, I remember, I will repeat again the introduction of Augustas in Thessaloniki about the fact that sometimes we feel that the European money, meaning the taxpayers' money, are not always invested in the best way. And sometimes you have to go against the hype. Yes, indeed. A few years ago, everything was about insect farming. A few years ago, also, everything was about vertical farming, as I said before. And then we realized that all of these technologies work, but they work on a special scale, and we have to have the right, allow me to tell, filters to know where we should stop burning money in this domain and go to the next. And then we need, because science and stakeholders, they provide information and politics decide as an organized way of society. So we also need to develop that kind of channels with our politicians to give them this information on time. European Commission works a lot, for example, with public consultations. From time to time, we are asked to provide our contribution. How many of us do we actually do it? Or we just keep the email? The thing is that we have to do it. We have to participate. We have to participate in every discussion like this one today to make sure that the decisions are actually reflecting the reality of the world out there. I enjoyed the previous panels very much because there were a lot of people straight from the market, bringing their experience from the market. And if we continue doing that and we bring different people together, I think we can make a few steps forward.
I think one means of financing that has not been mentioned yet, but it's trending in the Commission circles, is innovation procurement.
Yes.
Does anyone want to comment on that? We cannot afford ourselves not to mention innovation procurement. How trendy is it? How widespread? Do you want to say a couple of words?
There is a very big, good idea behind that funding mechanism. The good idea is that actually state can also be an agent of change, no matter how strange it sounds for the beginning. So the idea of this mechanism, I think, is that the state itself can try experimental technologies, can try new technologies, and can get some financing for that, for being brave. Now, I think it's also up to the particular government bodies that will utilize this mechanism to do it for the right reasons, to do it when innovation is really needed to break a problem, to change perception, to move things forward. Otherwise, it's rather bad investment of taxpayers' money. So the filter is important. The tool exists and it's an excellent mechanism. On the other side, an excellent mechanism is crowdfunding. Because in the crowdfunding, we're asking the consumers, the citizens, to support a product, a new product that is going to come, or to support even a cultural event, to support a humanitarian cause. These are also parts of the mix. It's about the ingredients you put in the right mix in the innovation always.
The right mix, and when you talked about venture capital, you said it's curing cancer with like head medicine or something like that. Why is that? Could you then briefly comment?
I think that the numbers show how much the broken food system costs to the planet, trillions, how much the venture capitalists invest to solve these problems, billions. It's an order of magnitude, you understand? So that's why I think that from these two figures we understand that state money is necessary, big corporate money is necessary, but also society needs to vouch in as well. There are two big problems to ignore possibilities of funding.
Okay. Let's turn back to the European Commission for a little bit. Maybe you could tell us how bioeconomy help by aligning different policies to address the needs of agri-food sector and other bioeconomic policies before we open this up to the audience.
Yes, if I can just briefly also touch upon the discussion that just took place. I think setting priorities is not only the job of at the EU level, but also at national and regional level. And therefore, I would really encourage member states and different agri-food actors to help set the priorities. And I think for this, it's very important to further develop your smart specialization strategies. We already heard that the Lithuanian agri-food sector has joined the smart specialization strategy. I think this is an excellent opportunity to build on the local strengths, and that is the means to foster research and development at local level, while at the same time supporting also the EU set priorities to tackle the major societal challenges, whether that would be climate change mitigation or food security globally. I think that's important to mention, and that's also something because I also come from a national administration, originally from Latvia, and that is something I observed quite a lot, that in order to match the priorities set by the EU, first it is very much needed to come with the the priorities at national level. And to follow up on the question about the role of the bioeconomy policy, well, as I mentioned before, we see the role of bioeconomy as this overarching holistic concept to bring together the different policies that are relevant, and they are being dealt by authorities both at national and EU level, and includes primary production, the agriculture, the food industry, consumption of biological resources, and also the ecosystem services. So all the policies such as the common agriculture policy, the common fisheries policy, the environmental policies, consumer policies, they're all part of the bioeconomy policy framework, and they all can help contribute to this transition to a more sustainable future, let's say. And here I would like to stress that the added value of the bioeconomy strategy, whether that's at national, EU, or regional level, is exactly this cross-sectoral character, because it can contribute to enhancing this coherence between different policies and different funding instruments, and to match the different needs. It doesn't replace like the sectoral policies, sectoral instruments, but it can help provide these systemic solutions for these different areas. And here, I think it's important to stress the importance that every member state has its own bioeconomy strategy to help address these different trade-offs and to find the best solutions. And that could be absolutely relevant to the agri-food sector, to the financing challenges that the agri-food sector is facing, to see it within the broader picture of bioeconomy.
I will just remind everybody that we've still got several minutes for questions, and if you want to ask your question on Slido, that would be all right. I will give you the floor in just a minute, but I want to bring us back to examples, because we have not highlighted initiatives, specific initiatives, specific examples that worked, and I think, as we did in previous discussions, it always works best. Maybe Virginia, I could ask you if you could highlight maybe some initiatives that the Institute has undertaken to ensure equitable access to funding, especially for grassroots innovations.
Yes, so first of all, maybe to reflect on what Grigoris was saying about first funding like vertical, then deciding to fund something else. I think that the aim would be to fund impact. It's not to select specific technology, but to fund impact. What projects can deliver most socioeconomic and environmental value, and this would increase, I think, efficiency and effectiveness of the funding. Now, with like this inclusive initiatives and grassroots movements, yes, actually, I don't know what in the context of the developed countries it might be, because it's usually connected to developing countries like Africa, India, some provinces, and there is a movements and they innovate. In developed countries, we are reach some level. Our production is more advanced, so I don't know whether it will be the most efficient way to innovate, because you don't need to, how to say, to invent bike, and you have like these knowledge institutions who can transfer knowledge and consult you. So I think that we need to consider the context in which we are applying this kind of model for that matter.
Any initiatives that Maria, you would like to mention?
I'm listening to you as well. You know, it's about, we don't always indeed have to reinvent the wheel again. We can really see how that is going. Also, like what Laura was saying there earlier, in a way that obviously it is not the role of the EU to define, you know, the member states, but where it helps though is that whenever there are like this kind of very overarching topics, like now, for example, bioeconomy, or like the supporting certain number of things in the longer term. So yeah, this is just a kind of a brain, just the thinking, not necessarily bringing another solution. For EAT food, I'm just thinking about also like some specific, you know, funding initiatives that we had. We recently had a innovation call for Central Eastern Europe. This was a good one. It was very much addressing the fact that food value chain is rather broken. Not only in the Central Eastern Europe, but certainly also because of the fact that Central Eastern European countries used to be very much food production companies rather than actually really on this added value and innovation. So once again, in those kind of transformations, the investment is also necessary to see that, okay, what is the level where we want to go and how this will be built. So indeed, yeah, I think we at the same time have to have indeed a specific focus, try to find maybe funding instruments that are addressing specific needs, and then at the same time, obviously making sure that the big picture is also maintained.
Do we have anybody in the audience who would like to make a comment or ask a question on funding? Do raise your hand and do ask any question you want, any comment you would want to make. If not, we will go towards wrapping up. What else, Grigoris? We have mentioned numerous instruments. We have said that the right balance is needed, finding the focus is needed. What are the funding mechanisms that should be explored more if we want to achieve?
Another interesting concept here, and we're a small impact venture studio, so we really cannot influence things a lot. But these days, in the upcoming couple of years, we are going to run a few programs that will finance solutions that improve the quality of life in rural areas. We should never forget that our food is produced in rural areas. And rural areas are not there only to produce food. They're there also to host infrastructure, to host people, to host cultural events. So at Foodscale Hub, we have 3 upcoming programs that will be financing innovations in rural areas that go beyond food production, that cover also energy, cover logistics, cover biodiversity. And we're really looking now at this point at those grassroots movements, at the place-based innovation ecosystems where people can really come together and create something in the most isolated parts. We have been discussing a lot what is the problem. We should not forget that we are in Europe and the biggest problem is isolation. How possible would it be without European projects that us coming from Greece would come to collaborate today with people from Lithuania on specific topics and problems? If we then look at it in a bigger granularity and we look at the issues that are related to the small rural areas, that there is innovation there as well. It needs also to be supported. By the way, Lithuanian partners are also participating in those programs, so I'm sure that the Lithuanian ecosystem will have the chance to benefit from them. I think that this is another angle that we should look at it, because actually rural areas are factories without a roof, factories for our food, and we need to take care of them.
How important is the funding for regional development, rural areas, Mr. Surplis, in Lithuania?
It is very important, and you know, we were discussing here what are alternative sources of funding and why don't we have success stories, or we don't have so many success stories? It's objective, I think. Agriculture is a thing which is with no roof. It can get drought, it can get floods, it can get diseases. There's food security behind. The physical barriers, they create the dilemma that we now have plenty of Ukrainian grain that cannot be exported to Africa, which needs this grain, etc., etc. So agriculture, in a sense, is a very complicated issue, related to very sensitive issues like food security and environment, etc., etc. That is why seeing a unicorn is quite hard, I would say. So therefore, this public funding will have to remain. But just the main idea that I wanted to tell you today, to focus, to point, is that the EU funding will also shrink.
Yeah.
And the demand from from taxpayers will be higher and higher. So we have to make it very focused, very targeted, and we have to use it rationally. So by this green, I just meant to say that, if we go green, we have to go green rationally, not only, on papers or, on slogans. So if you want to go, less emissions, then you don't send your trailers all over Europe empty just because, the French want to fight competitors from Poland or Lithuania. So these things, they have to be tuned, and the money, the public spending must be very, very rational. So without the public money, I would be very pessimistic, and I think that we will not have many unicorns in agricultural sector, just because of objective reasons.
Ekaterina, would you be as pessimistic?
My favorite two phrases today were responsible investing and future needs. So we need to balance in between. Yeah, so I agree, and I can see that the shrinking is coming. So I think what we need to do is to really change, switch with this culture and really develop our companies to get funded by us, just to the stage when they're attractive to private equity and to private capital. We just need to, get them there, and that's it, and give them to, investor in private capital, and that's our job to do, to teach
But
them.
I have not asked you for a specific example. How does the Biotech Lab collaborate with financial institutions and investors?
Well,
for
we are on
funding?
it right now. Actually, we are gathering all the feedback from different stakeholders in the ecosystem. What are the problems with the tools we have right now? We are identifying, our pain points, and of course, we're going to address them.
Just as a very, very final comment to make sure that we have extracted all of the financial mechanisms there are, maybe Grigoris, you could share yet a final summary or an insight of any unique financial mechanisms that have been developed specifically for the agri-food sector.
Okay, normally people like to share stories of success. Am I allowed to share a story of failure?
Yes.
I know that.
At one point, I had this brilliant idea that crowdfunding really works for the agri-food sector, and we can really launch agri-food products through crowdfunding mechanisms. And we established a platform for that, and we tried to do this thing. It all looked brilliant, and the European Commission considers still it as a success story. But I will tell you, it was the time, hell broke loose. Why? Because the ecosystem was not mature to play fair in such a game. It means that people were trying to tweak the system, people were trying to pull the system from one side to the other, and at the end, the learning takeaway I took from this process myself is that timing is most important factor. So I would say all the financing tools exist, but you have to do it on the right time and with the right people.
Okay, let's end on that note. Timing is also an important aspect. Unless the European Commission representative wants to say a final word, she's online with us and we are about to wrap up. Any final comment?
Well, what I can say that the Commission will continue supporting the agri-food sector, as food security is one of its priorities, and what we need from you, the stakeholders, is to help us developing the policies, future work programs, future funding instruments, and you can do that by participating in the consultations, sharing your success and failure stories. It's very much welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Thank you, all of the panelists here. Let's give you a big round of applause now. Thanks a lot.